I was 16 when I started working at the shop. Back then, it was just a dusty little warehouse on the edge of town. Concrete floors, humming fluorescents, and shelves stacked with cardboard boxes that always seemed one breath away from collapsing. Dad called it a humble beginning. I called it home. While my friends were spending their weekends at parties or on road trips, I was hauling pallets, managing invoices, and answering customer calls with a smile too big for my tired eyes. Every corner of that place carried my fingerprints. Every spreadsheet, every process, every long night spent figuring out how to make things run just a little smoother. At first, Dad appreciated it. He used to ruffle my hair and say, "You're sharper than most of the guys I hire, Lil." That meant something. It was rare for him to say anything that wasn't soaked in sarcasm or irritation. My brother Derek was different. He was 3 years older. Charming, careless, always the golden boy. While I was sweating in the warehouse, Derek was off finding himself at one expensive college after another. He never stayed long. Too many parties, too many excuses, too little accountability. And yet, Dad never judged him the way he judged me. "He'll come around," Dad always said. "He just needs time." But I didn't get time. I got expectations. By the time I turned 25, our family business, once just a cluttered supply hub, had become a full-service distribution company with regional contracts and a growing reputation. I'd streamlined operations, built a customer service team from scratch, and even convinced Dad to go digital. Revenue soared. By 28, we were worth $60 million. And still, I was just helping out. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even salaried. I was just the daughter. The daughter who, apparently, didn't count. I kept going, though. Because I believed that someday my loyalty would matter. That I'd prove myself enough for Dad to see me not just as the kid who worked hard, but the woman who made it all happen. Then came last Friday. We were in the conference room, Dad, Derek, and me. There was no warning, no preamble. Just Dad sipping his coffee like he was about to tell me we were out of toner. "Starting next quarter," he said, "Derek's going to take over client relations and strategic growth." I blinked. That's my role. Derek shrugged, lounging in the seat like it was his throne. "Time to step aside, Lil." Then he smirked. "You're kind of worthless now." The words sliced deeper than I expected, not because I believed them, but because he did, because Dad did. I turned to my father, waiting for him to push back, to defend me. He didn't. He just nodded. It's for the best. That moment, it's burned into my memory. The way Derek smiled like he'd finally won. The way my father looked at me like I was just an old fixture in a building he was about to remodel. I didn't say a word. No arguments, no begging, no tears. I simply stood, gathered my things, and walked out. But as I closed the door behind me, I made a silent promise. They thought I was leaving quietly. They thought I'd just fade into the background like all my effort, all my sacrifice, had never mattered. They had no idea what was coming. Because I wasn't just the daughter. I was the architect of this company. And the following Monday, they were going to learn exactly what that meant. Monday morning arrived with the same sky, the same street noise, the same scent of burnt coffee at the corner cafe. But nothing felt the same. Not to me. I stood outside our company's headquarters, staring at the familiar building I had helped rebuild from the inside out, both literally and figuratively. The glass walls reflected the morning sun, just like always. But today they felt like a mirror held up to something I could no longer recognize. The company was no longer mine, or so they thought. I walked through the front doors without hesitation, nodding to the receptionist who gave me an awkward half-smile. She had heard. I could see it in her eyes. The sympathy, the confusion, the unspoken, "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The hum of keyboards and phones filled the air as I passed through the office floor. Whispers trailed behind me, soft, uncertain. "She's here." I thought she quit. Didn't Derek take over? I kept walking. I wasn't here to explain myself. I was here to finish what I started. My office was exactly how I'd left it. Organized, focused, mine. Even the photo of my mom and me on the desk hadn't been touched. Funny, my father had always said we should leave personal matters at home. Yet here he was, dragging family drama into the boardroom like a wrecking ball. I booted up my computer and slid a slim folder from my bag onto the desk. Inside, signed documents, email threads, timestamps, and contracts. I'd spent the entire weekend preparing every detail. Not in revenge, not in anger, but with precision. Because unlike my brother, I didn't run on emotion. I ran on facts. I opened a secure file and typed in the password I had never once shared. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I pulled up the one document Derek and Dad had forgotten about. Or maybe had never known existed. Employee Equity Memorandum, January 3rd, 2016. Signed by my father back when we were just trying to survive. When I was still his secret weapon. The document outlined a 22% equity transfer to me in lieu of salary, structured as silent shares. Dad had insisted it remain off the books to avoid friction with investors. "You'll get your real recognition one day," he had told me. "This is just temporary." Like everything else, I was supposed to be temporary. But those shares? They weren't. And combined with a quiet 18% gifted by my late mother in her estate, a fact neither Derek nor Dad had ever bothered to confirm, I was now the largest individual shareholder in the company, 40%. That was no longer just a voice in the room. That was power, real power. I didn't plan to swing it wildly. I didn't want chaos. I wanted truth. At exactly 10 a.m., I requested an emergency meeting with the board. 10 minutes later, my father stormed into my office without knocking. Derek followed, trailing arrogance like cheap cologne. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My father snapped. His voice was low, sharp. "Taking care of unfinished business," I replied, calm as ever. "You left," Derek cut in. "Everyone saw it. That means you've stepped down." I turned my monitor so they could see the document glowing on the screen. I watched their faces closely. The slight twitch in Dad's jaw, the confusion giving way to panic in Derek's eyes. "What is that?" my father asked. I tapped the screen. "That's the memorandum you signed 9 years ago. You gave me equity, Dad. Silent shares, but binding nonetheless." He leaned closer, squinting at the digital signature. "This was supposed to be temporary. You never put an expiration date on it." "And what does this change?" Derek stammered, suddenly less confident. I slid the folder across the desk. "It changes everything." They opened it. Inside were copies of emails, legal confirmations, and most importantly, the formal notice calling for a shareholder vote on leadership roles within the company. "I've already contacted the board," I said quietly. "They'll convene in 30 minutes. We're going to vote." Dad stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Derek sputtered something under his breath, but I wasn't listening anymore. Because in that moment, I realized something. They had spent so long seeing me as the girl who helped, the sidekick, the spare. But I wasn't that anymore. I never had been. They were just too blind to notice. My father opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "Save it," I said. "You've had years to appreciate what I did for this company. I'm done explaining myself." Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Then, finally, my father said, "You're making a mistake." "No," I replied, rising from my chair. "I'm correcting one." And with that, I walked out of the office, folder in hand, toward the boardroom. Toward the truth. Toward the battle I had been preparing for all along. The boardroom was cold, not in temperature, though the AC always seemed a few degrees too strong, but in energy. Conversations quieted the moment I stepped inside. Half the executives avoided my eyes. The other half looked straight at me, carefully, as if trying to gauge what kind of storm I was bringing in with me. I took my usual seat at the table. Not at the far end where Dad always sat. Not beside him either. the head of the table, my rightful place. Dad and Derek entered a moment later, their expressions stiff. My father's mouth was set in a tight line, like he was preparing to issue orders. Derek, meanwhile, couldn't even hide the irritation flashing in his eyes. He dropped into a chair, slouched back, and muttered under his breath. "Drama queen." I ignored him. The board members exchanged polite greetings, awkward smiles, nods, the kind of surface-level civility that only exists when everyone in the room knows something serious is about to go down. "Let's begin," I said, my voice steady. My father cleared his throat, clearly trying to take control. "Before we get ahead of ourselves, I'd like to clarify something." "We're not here for clarification," I interrupted. "We're here for a vote." One of the senior board members, Elaine Chambers, shifted in her seat. She had been with the company since before I was born. Always professional, always neutral. "Lily," she said carefully, "we haven't received official notice of leadership changes. This feels sudden." "It's not sudden," I replied. "It's overdue." I tapped my tablet, projecting a document onto the wall screen. "Proposal. Leadership realignment vote." Underneath in bold, "Per the shareholder voting rights agreement, revised 2019. Any holder of more than 25% equity may call for a formal vote on leadership restructuring, with a simple majority required for action." Every head in the room turned toward my father. He didn't speak. Instead, I kept going. "I currently hold 40% of Harper Distribution through a combination of silent equity and inheritance from my late mother's estate. All of it is legally documented and confirmed." I paused. Let it sink in. Derek straightened up, suddenly alert. "Wait, inheritance?" I turned to him, calm but direct. "Mom left me her shares. Maybe if you'd paid attention to anything other than your vacations and credit card bills, you would have known." He flushed but said nothing. I continued. "Over the past 10 years, I've overseen every major operations expansion, negotiated our biggest contracts, and built our customer retention rate to industry-leading numbers. I'm not stepping aside." A murmur passed through the room. My father raised a hand. "This company was founded by me. It's my name on the papers, and I've made the hard decisions to bring us this far." "No," I said sharply. "You made the early decisions, but I made the ones that mattered most." I pulled up a graph. Revenue, profit margins, market share, all showing exponential growth. Starting the year I took over operations. I turned to the board. "I've been quiet for years. I let the title stay under my father's name. I let my brother waltz in and out without consequences. I stayed in my lane. But last week I was told, by my own family, that I'm worthless, that I need to step aside." The words stung even now. "But I won't." A long pause followed. Then Elaine leaned forward. "And what exactly are you proposing, Lily?" I looked directly at her. "I'm proposing a formal vote. One item on the agenda. Who leads this company moving forward?" "And if the board doesn't vote in your favor?" another member asked. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Then I'll sell my 40% on the open market, preferably to a competitor. Let's see how long we last then." That got their attention. Even Derek's cocky grin faltered. "You wouldn't?" my father snapped. "I would," I replied. "And I will." Silence gripped the room like a vice. Then, slowly, Elaine reached for her tablet. "I vote in favor of Lily Harper as CEO." One by one, the votes came in. A few hesitant, some firm, one abstention. But it didn't matter. I had the majority. When the final tally was displayed on the screen, Lily Harper, 6 votes. James Harper, 2. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was done. My father didn't say a word. He simply stood, adjusted his suit jacket, and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. Derek remained seated, stunned, like the floor had dropped beneath him. I looked at him, finally, and said, "You said I was worthless." He blinked. I leaned closer. I just proved otherwise. And with that, I stood, still calm, still steady, and walked out of the boardroom. For the first time, not as the helper, not as the daughter, but as the one in charge. The boardroom vote may have been over, but the battle had just begun. By Tuesday morning, the entire company knew. The usual buzz around the office felt strained, hushed. Conversations died when I walked by. Some employees gave me wide-eyed glances, like I'd just pulled off a hostile takeover. Others averted their eyes, unsure where their loyalties should lie now. I understood. These were people who had worked under my father's rule for decades, who had seen Derek stroll through the halls like a prince in waiting. I had always been the silent engine, the fixer behind the curtain. Now, I was the face of the company, and they didn't know what to make of me. Still, I showed up. I walked in early, as I always did. I greeted the receptionist. I stopped by the operations floor. I answered emails before most people had clocked in. Because being the CEO wasn't about titles or status. It was about showing up again and again, even when people whispered, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. That afternoon, I found a note slipped under my office door. Just one line, written in rushed, all-caps scrawl. You think this is over? It's not. There was no name, but I didn't need one. It was Derek's handwriting. I stared at the note for a long time, then folded it in half and tucked it into the back of my notebook. Let him rage. Let him fume. He didn't understand that I hadn't won through manipulation. I had won by preparing, by showing up when it counted, by doing the work he had always avoided. But Derek wasn't the only one who couldn't handle what happened. Late that evening, as I sat alone in my office going over quarterly projections, my phone buzzed. Dad. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. Lily, he said, voice gruff, tired. I said nothing. I want to talk, he continued, face to face. Now? Come to the house, he said. Please. It was the first time in years he had said that word to me. I pulled up to my parents' house just after 9 p.m. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow over the cracked steps and ivy-covered columns. I used to love this house as a kid. It felt so much bigger back then. Safe. Warm. Now it just felt like a monument to everything unspoken. Dad was waiting in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a half-empty glass of whiskey. He didn't stand when I entered. I heard about the vote, he said. You were there, I replied. You know what happened. He nodded slowly. You embarrassed me. I raised an eyebrow. You tried to erase me. Silence. He looked older than I remembered, not just in the way his hair had gone completely gray or the lines carved deep around his mouth, but in his posture. His shoulders were slumped, like the weight of the truth had finally found him. You were never supposed to take it this far, he said. No, I said. I was never supposed to fight back. You were my daughter, Lily. I thought you understood the plan. What plan? I asked, genuinely confused. He took a breath, long and slow. Derek was always going to lead. That was expected. You were supposed to support him. You were good at that. The words burned. Not because they were surprising, but because deep down I had always feared they were true. I built this company, I said, voice trembling now. I was here when you couldn't pay the electric bill. I was the one who stayed late when the trucks broke down. I found our first major supplier deal. And you still saw me as support? He didn't answer. You chose him, I said, quieter now. Even when he did nothing, even when I gave everything. My father looked away. He's my son. And I'm your daughter, I said, fire creeping back into my voice. But that was never enough for you, was it? The silence between us stretched until it was almost unbearable. Then he looked back at me. You were always the better leader, he admitted, but I didn't think the world would follow a woman's lead. The confession hit me like a punch. It wasn't personal, not really. It was generational, systemic. He didn't trust the world to accept me, so he never gave me the chance to prove it could. But I did anyway. And that terrified him. I stood up. "You were wrong," I said. "The board followed me. The clients will follow me. The world already is." He nodded once. "So what now?" I looked him in the eye. "Now I lead. You can accept it or get out of the way." Then I turned and walked out, not waiting for his response, because I had already heard everything I needed. I had won the vote. But the war for respect, that was still underway. And I wasn't done yet. By Thursday, the shift in energy around the office had turned from uncertainty to tension. It was in the way conversations stopped when I entered a room, in the quick glances traded in the hallway, in the senior manager who suddenly forgot to include me in the morning strategy meeting. Derek hadn't left quietly. Instead, he'd done what he always did, manipulated from the shadows. I heard whispers that he'd been meeting with a few department heads over drinks, trying to reassure them during this chaotic time, painting himself as the rightful heir, the stabilizing presence, the prince trying to rally the court. It was laughable, but it was also dangerous, because power in a company isn't just about titles or board votes, it's about perception. And Derek knew how to spin a story. That afternoon, I got a call from Linda, our head of PR. She sounded nervous. "There's a rumor going around," she said, voice low, "that you're planning to sell the company." I froze. That was never the plan. "What?" I asked, incredulous. "Derek's telling people you only forced the vote to increase your stock value before offloading everything to an outside firm. He's hinting at layoffs, uncertainty, the works." I closed my eyes and breathed in slowly. Classic Derek. If he couldn't lead, he'd burn the place down trying to prove no one else should either. "Schedule a company-wide meeting," I said. "Tomorrow morning, everyone, I want every single department present." She hesitated. "That's going to raise more questions." "Good," I said. "Let's answer them." Friday morning, 9 a.m., sharp. I stood at the front of our largest conference hall, a space usually reserved for shareholder updates and client presentations. Today, it was filled with over 100 employees, some standing along the back wall, others crammed into folding chairs. I had never addressed them all like this before. Not as CEO, not as Lily Harper, the woman who had just torn down the legacy power structure that had defined the company for decades. I stepped up to the mic. No notes, no script. Just truth. "I know a lot has happened in the past week," I began, "and I know many of you are wondering what this means for the company, for your departments, for your future here." The room was silent. Good. They were listening. "So let's clear the air," I continued. "No, I'm not selling the company. No, I'm not planning layoffs. And no, this isn't about a power grab." I let my gaze move across the room. This is about evolution. For too long, this company was stuck in old ways of thinking. Leadership based on family name instead of skill. Decisions made behind closed doors instead of in the best interest of our employees. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to lead, and I want to show you what that actually means. I gestured to the screen behind me. A presentation lit up. Simple, clean, direct. Harper 2.0. The next 10 years, I walked them through the plan. New market expansions, an employee profit-sharing program, leadership development for women and underrepresented staff, remote flexibility options, tech upgrades to make their jobs easier, not harder, real change, tangible, measurable. By the time I finished, the room was no longer silent. People were nodding, whispering, leaning toward each other with wide eyes. But I wasn't done. "I know some of you have heard rumors," I said, voice hardening just slightly. "You've been told I forced my way into this role, that I don't know how to lead, that I'm here to cash out." I paused. "I want you to know something. I gave up most of my 20s for this company. I missed birthdays, relationships, sleep. I didn't do that to flip a paycheck. I did it because I believe in what we can become. And if anyone here doesn't believe I'm the right person to lead us forward, my door is always open. A quiet laugh broke the tension. Just one, then a few more. Then a single clap, and another. Until the entire room was applauding. Not polite, not forced, but real. It's strange how quiet victory can feel. Not the movie version. The cheering, the champagne, the celebratory dinners. Number real victory, the kind you earn inch by inch, sacrifice by sacrifice, is quieter. Like stepping into a room you've spent years building, only to finally realize it's yours. That following Monday, I arrived at the office early again, just like I always had. But for the first time, no one questioned it. No stares, no whispers, just quiet respect and presence. Derek didn't show up that day, or the next. Eventually, HR confirmed he'd cleared out his office. Left a note. No goodbyes. Just a statement about pursuing new opportunities. Classic Derek. When things didn't bend to him, he disappeared. No responsibility, no accountability. Just a mess for someone else to clean up. Dad, however, didn't disappear. On Friday, I found him waiting for me in the lobby. Not in his usual crisp suit, but in jeans and a windbreaker. Casual. Small. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Then what are you here for?" "To talk." We went to the conference room. The same one where I had taken my seat at the head of the table. The same place where the balance of power had shifted forever. "I thought I had time," he said. "Time to teach Derek how to lead. Time to ease you into something softer." Softer? He looked at me, but not with judgment this time. More like realization. "I didn't think you'd outgrow the role I had imagined for you." I let the silence settle before answering. "I didn't outgrow it," I said. "You just never looked close enough to see what I was already doing." He nodded slowly. "You were right about the vote. The shares, the company, all of it." It wasn't an apology, but it was closer than anything he'd ever given me. "I don't need you to validate me anymore," I said, honest and calm. "But I do need you to understand something." He sat back, arms crossed, listening. "This company isn't just numbers and contracts, it's people. It's purpose. It's mine because I was the only one who treated it like a living thing instead of a birthright. I earned this." "I know," he said quietly. I studied him for a long moment. He looked older now, not just in appearance, but in spirit. As if watching me take the reins had shown him something he wasn't prepared to face. Regret. Maybe not for how he treated me, but for realizing too late that he had underestimated the one person who'd never stopped fighting for him. For us. "I'm retiring," he said finally. "Fully. No consulting, no shadow deals. I'll keep my small stake, but the rest, I'm transferring to you." I didn't move. "You should have done that years ago." "I know," he said again. "But back then, I didn't see you as a leader. I saw you as my daughter." "And now?" "Now I see both." We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We just sat there in the quiet for a moment longer, two people finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. When he left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. It's been 6 months since the day I took control. We've hit new revenue records, expanded to 2 new regions, and our employee satisfaction rating is the highest it's ever been. The profit-sharing program is thriving. And the leadership team? More diverse, more forward-thinking, more real. But the win I'm proudest of? A small moment last week. I passed by one of our junior analysts giving a tour to a group of interns. She pointed to the executive wing and said, "That's where Lily Harper's office is. She's the reason I want to be in leadership one day." That's what legacy is. Not a name on a door, not shares or power or headlines, but impact. Real, quiet, lasting impact. I still think about that day in the boardroom, about Derek's voice dripping with contempt, telling me I was worthless. But now, when I hear those words in my mind, I don't feel pain. I feel power. Because I know what I am. I'm not just a daughter. I'm not just a worker. I'm not someone who needed permission to lead. I'm the woman who built a legacy from the ground up and refused to let anyone take it from her. So to every person who's been told to step aside, to every woman who's been underestimated, sidelined, or dismissed, don't wait for the title. Don't wait for their approval. Build it anyway. And when they finally look up, make sure they see everything they were too blind to notice. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is becoming undeniable.